Israeli media say the government has been told by legal officials that the ICC is considering an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu.
Ukraine moves to restrict rights of citizens under martial law.
Thousands protest in Tbilisi against controversial foreign influence legislation critics have dubbed the Russian law. At a mass in Venice, Pope Francis says he's thinking about the conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza. Israeli media say the government has been told by legal officials that the International Criminal Court is considering issuing an arrest warrant for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The ICC investigation into Israel's actions in the occupied West Bank and Gaza could also see arrest warrants issued for other senior members of the government. This comes as protests continue in cities across Israel, with protesters demanding the government do more to secure the release of the hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza. An official from Hamas said a delegation from the group would discuss an Israeli-tabled ceasefire proposal during a visit to Cairo on Monday. Efforts to revive stalled ceasefire talks have ramped up in recent days in a bid to stop a threatened Israeli ground offensive in Rafah, the southern city where more than half of Gaza's population has sought shelter.
A small strike is all it takes to force everyone to leave Palestine, and we will be witnessing the greatest catastrophe in the history of the Palestinian people. We ask Israel to stop its attack.
Meanwhile, Israel says aid deliveries to Gaza are being stepped up as countries including the United States and Jordan continue to airdrop supplies into the Strip.
Over the last few weeks, the amount of humanitarian aid going into Gaza has significantly increased. In the coming days, the amount of aid going into Gaza will continue to scale up even more.
But a spokesperson at the World Food Programme says that while increased levels of aid are a good sign, it's too early to say if the risk of famine has been averted.
Kyiv has updated a list of restrictions for its citizens under martial law. Ukraine, which has been under martial law since February 2022, is able to restrict its citizens' movements. Currently, men between the ages of 18 and 60 are prevented from leaving Ukraine in order to fight in the army. Ukraine also recently lowered conscription age from 27 to 25 in order to summon more manpower for its army. The country is in desperate need of soldiers on the battlefield. Meanwhile, in the city of Rivne, a dismantled Soviet monument will be scrapped in order to provide funds for the military. The memorial for World War II soldiers is the last in the region to be dismantled. Its parts will be used to buy drones for Ukrainian soldiers. In its place, city authorities plan to create a memorial to Ukrainian soldiers of war.
Italy has returned to make itself known and count internationally. Most importantly, Italy can change Europe. These were the words of Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni as she addressed Brothers of Italy's three-day conference here in Pescara. The occasion marked the official launch of the party's electoral campaign ahead of the European elections. And most importantly, on this occasion, Giorgia Meloni announced that she's running in those elections, a decision that will help her party gain more support. And given that she's the president of the ECR group, well, the decision carries a significant weight. And speaking about the future European Parliament, she also vowed to create a right-wing bloc, very similar to what she described as the Italian model that could replicate what has been happening here in Italy with the right-wing ruling coalition. However, more clarity on which political forces will be part of that coalition will be only provided after the elections. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews. in Pescara.
Thousands of people in Georgia have again taken to the streets of the capital Tbilisi to protest against the foreign influence transparency law. Many protesters fear the proposed legislation would undermine democracy and derail the country's chances of joining the European Union.
საკონტროლო ბრძოლა ჩვენ ან ახლა გადავარჩენთ ჩვენს ქვეყანას და შევინარჩუნებთ სვლას ევროპისკენ იქ სადაც არის ჩვენი ადგილი ან დავკარგავთ ქვეყანას ამას ძალიან ხელშესახებად გრძნობ მაგრამ თან ამავდროულად ადამიანების ენერგია განწყობა განსაკუთრებით ახალგაზრდების ჩართულობის ხარისხი ძალიან დიდი მეც მაძლევს და რწმენას რომ ჩვენ ამ გამარჯვებას აუცილებლად მივიყვანთ ბოლომდე.
The divisive draft law requires media and non-commercial organisations to register as being under foreign influence if they receive more than 20% of their funding from abroad. Critics have dubbed it the Russian law because Moscow uses similar legislation to stigmatise media and organisations seen as being at odds with the Kremlin. But despite fierce public opposition, the ruling Georgian Dream Party appears determined to press ahead.
ერთ არგუმენტს ვერ ამბობენ, ან რუსული არ არის, ან ცუდი რა არის. ბოლოს ოდნავ თითქოს 1%-იანი არგუმენტი დავარქვათ პირობითად. სახელზე ლაპარაკ, იმიტომ რომ დიახ, როდესაც დაფინანსება არსებობს, იმას მიიღება მისი ინტერესი.
Although Georgia's president has said she would veto the law if it's passed by parliament, the ruling party can override that veto by collecting 76 votes. Then the parliament speaker can sign it into law.
Dozens of people gave fascist salutes and chants to honour Italian dictator Bonito Mussolini on the 79th anniversary of his execution on Sunday. Dressed in black, neo-fascists marched through the towns where Mussolini was arrested and executed in 1945, as well as in Predapio, his birthplace and burial site. They were met by anti-fascist protesters who sang the famous resistance anthem Bella Ciao. The anniversary of Mussolini's execution fell on the same day that Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni announced her candidacy in the European elections at her party conference. Meloni's far-right Brothers of Italy party traces its roots to the Italian social movement, which was founded in 1946 by a chief of staff in Mussolini's last government.
Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, traveled to Beijing where he met Chinese Prime Minister Li Qiang. His visit comes during the Beijing Motor Show, where the country's car manufacturers are displaying their electric car models. Tesla has a major manufacturing base in Shanghai for both domestic sales in China and exports to Europe and other regions. His visit comes as the European Union has launched an investigation into Chinese subsidies for the electric vehicle industry. The investigation could lead to tariffs on electric vehicles made in China and potentially include Tesla cars. Green energy subsidies in China have helped transform the auto market, where electric vehicles are overtaking petrol-powered cars. Protests have erupted in Turin as G7 ministers meet to discuss climate. The protesters blocked a highway and set fire to photographs of several leaders. The meeting is the first major meeting of ministers since COP28 in Dubai in December. Environment ministers from countries such as Canada, France and the UK will meet for 4 sessions over 2 days. Currently, not a single member of the G7 is on track to meet its emission reduction targets for 2030.
The European Union released a statement denouncing a new law passed by the Iraqi parliament over the weekend, which would impose heavy prison sentences on gay and transgender people. The statement reveals that the new legislation not just breaks the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, but also breaks the Iraq's own constitution. The law imposes a sentence of 10 to 15 years for same-sex relations and smaller prison terms for gender transition surgeries.
Pope Francis has said he's thinking about the struggles facing the people of Haiti. He was speaking to thousands who had gathered on St. Mark's Square in Venice to hear him offer Mass.
Penso ad Haiti, dove è in vigore lo stato d'emergenza e la popolazione è disperata per il collasso del sistema sanitario, la scarsità di cibo e le violenze che spingono alla fuga.
Haiti has been in turmoil since the 2021 assassination of President Jovenel Moïse. Gang violence is rife in the capital, with armed groups controlling most of Port-au-Prince. Pope Francis voiced concerns about several global conflicts.
Penso alla martoriata Ucraina, alla Palestina, a Israele, ai Rohingya e tante popolazioni che soffrono a causa di guerre e violenze. Il Dio della pace illumini i cuori perché cresca in tutti la volontà di dialogo e di riconciliazione.
The trip represents an increasingly rare outing for the 87-year-old pontiff, who has had a number of health and mobility problems in recent years. In concluding his visit to Venice, the Pope jokingly asked the congregation not to forget to pray for him, saying this work is not easy.